Hi, I'm Adam Trashy, welcome to the channel. So this question's popped up a few times over the last couple of videos in the Milsim series, and it is, what are the common mistakes? It has been worded a few different ways, but what are the common mistakes that you see people make when they're turning up to a Milsim? So I'm just going to jump straight into that. The biggest one for me is dehydration, people not bringing enough water with them. You know, if I'm away Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I've got at least 8 litres. Some people will say that's too much, some people will say that's not enough. For me, that works. That allows me to have about 1 litre for cooking, and it gives me about 2 and a little bit litres per day. We are normally turning up there Friday afternoon, Friday evening, so it does give me a little bit over. I always make sure that I'm staying hydrated. I've seen people turning up for the first time, turning up with 1-2 litre bottle of water for their entire weekend, cans of Monster Energy and Lucozade and all those sorts of things. I'm not saying you can't drink those, definitely feel free. You know, those sugary sort of drinks are going to help you, they are going to get you out of a bit of a rut, but obviously you can crash on the other side of those. I love the Starbucks double shot espressos in the little cans. They're my absolute favourite, but make sure that you're staying hydrated as well. Matt will probably push that amount of water up. He goes through an absolute ton of water over a weekend, so you know, different people are going to have different amounts, but definitely, you know, you want to be taking 6 litres at least. And all that time you're out on the ground, all the time you're bumping kit around, you're doing long infills, you're moving to OPs, all the time you're moving around with all that heavy kit on, you've got to make sure that you have water going in. I've seen guys that are inexperienced go through headaches, you know, they start to feel really dry, they feel a bit nauseous, and you know, them deep sort of real thumping headaches begin to set in with, you know, the severe dehydration, especially when it pushes into the early hours of the morning where people are beginning to fatigue as well. And I've also seen that through to some really experienced guys I've been out on the ground with. They've had half a litre of water through a boiling hot day, moving around with a ton of kit on, and then they're in bed at 11 o'clock at night with a really bad headache, and then it's time for them to try and catch up and rehydrate. So dehydration is the biggest mistake that I see people make. Make sure the whole time you're there you've constantly got water going on board. It's not a problem for you to stop to have a wee, you know, get the rest of your team to you know, bow you or give you some cover while you quickly go to the toilet, but it is a massive problem if you've got a thumping headache and then you're in bed at 10 o'clock at night. So stay hydrated is one of the key ones. Warm food for me is another mistake. You know, people bring along, you know, sandwiches, bags of crisps, you know, sometimes it's more towards like pasties and those types of dry pastry sort of foods with quite a low nutritional value. If you can get stuff with a ton of calories in, if you can have protein bars, you can have stuff that is stuffed with decent, I say decent with a light term there, but you know, decent amounts of calorific value, then make sure that you have that. Matt and the rest of my guys in my team, you know, over the weekend they had done themselves some massive big Tupperware pots of pasta with chicken and all sorts of stuff like that in, and just to keep chomping through that all day, just to make sure you've got the calories going in. Again, you do end up exerting a ton of energy, especially if you're bumping around with a hell of a lot of kit on, especially a lot more calories than you're going to go through normally. So hot food is always good if you've got a jet boil and you can do yourself some MRE, some boil in the bag foods. I was having some boil in the bags chicken casseroles at Carewent that just gone with Sterling Airsoft. And that was a very cold weekend. It rained the whole time we were there, and to come back in and have a nice big pot of chicken casserole was absolutely lovely. A few minutes in a jet boil and it was nice and warm. Wolfed that down, then made myself a cup of tea and I was golden. So warm food's definitely something else. A decent level of boot and waterproof. This was in the last video that I spoke about. If you haven't checked that out, like the first 3 things that I would recommend for someone to buy, make sure you go and check that video out. There's a lot of really good information in that, but essentially making sure you've got a decent waterproof jacket, whether it be a Gore-Tex issue one that you can pick up from a surplus shop for quite cheap. If not, Claw Gear do some really nice waterproof stuff. I've got their Milirax jacket. No, it's not cheap, but I was in the absolute pissing rain all weekend and not a drop of water got through that jacket. It's absolutely solid. Decent level of boots. I did speak about this before, but making sure that your feet don't get wet, especially if you're crossing through some real deep puddles. There were some really monstrous puddles at Carewent, and crossing straight through them just to get to an objective, making sure your feet don't get wet, because they will get sore, especially if you're doing some long infills. One of our missions took us about 3 hours, and that was moving constantly at quite a quick pace. So we did actually cover a lot of ground over that weekend. Again, making sure the water's going on, you've got food going in, is really key. That's pretty much it. Towards the lighter side of things, when you move towards some of the more severe mistakes that I've seen people make, we had some guys turn up at the Valley in November. It was -5 on the drive in. By the time we'd got in there and started setting up, it was about 0 degrees. It was very, very cold. I was heavily layered up. Well, Gore-Tex trousers, absolutely everything. I had a burger on my back. We had some guys turn up in desert gear. They were in desert lowers with the mesh panels on the side, and they got exfilled out of the valley that night with close to hypothermia conditions, and there was a real worry about them at one point, especially as the fact that the valley is so remote, and they were not in the right gear at all, especially for that environment. So, common mistake. Don't underestimate your environment. Don't always expect the weather to be perfect. We've had events. I went to Cope Hill and the weather was meant to be beautiful all weekend. We got to Saturday night, there was absolutely torrential thunderstorms. It got very cold very quick. A lot of the guys out on the ground got really soaked, and a lot of them hadn't expected that to happen, so none of them had hard shells packed or anything like that, and the guys just got soaked through, and it made their Sunday a little bit miserable. So just don't underestimate the weather. That's a common mistake. Just make sure you've got a hard shell. They take up no space, especially if you've got one of these light compressible ones, a bit like the Claw Gear Milirax. You know, you can squash it into a ball about this big, stuff it into a backpack. If you don't use it, you don't use it, but if it lashes it down, you can quickly throw it on to keep yourself nice and dry, then absolutely perfect. So don't underestimate the weather for sure. The conditions of the environment, I'm pretty sure that guys are good with this. You know, if you are going to do a rural event and you're going to be out in the woods for the entire weekend, and you know that they've got some severe weather coming in, then just be prepared for that. Just be aware that you know, you're going to be in muddy, wet, horrible, boggy environments. Make sure you've got a bivvy bag and those types of things, and that your backpack's got some type of waterproof level. Worst comes to the worst, guys, if you've got a big backpack and you just want to keep all your stuff nice and dry, then just get your bivvy bag, put it inside your backpack, stuff everything inside your bivvy bag, seal that closed, and then if your backpack does get soaking wet and you're doing a long infill, then you know that everything inside that bivvy is going to be nice and dry. So that's always an option, rather than you having to go and get a really expensive waterproof backpack. You can just stick everything inside a bivvy. So you know, don't underestimate your environment, don't underestimate your weather, water, food, and just being prepared for being out on the ground for long periods of time. Lastly, I think I'll touch on this very lightly, but I'm going to go into another video. Moving out the fob, some guys just expect to be out on the ground for 20-30 minutes, and then when they're out there for 3 or 4 hours, they go out completely unprepared. We've had this with guys in my team, and I've seen this with other guys out on the ground. They go out of the fob, they leave all their food behind, their water, their spare mags, their bombing up equipment, their BBs and that sort of thing. They're like, oh, we're not going to be out for long. They get into a massive firefight, they get stuck in a building, they're surrounded by enemies, and an hour or so into the firefight, they've got no water, they've got no food, they're running low on their BBs, they're running low on their pyro and that sort of thing. So just every time you leave that gate, prepare to be out for 3 hours. It's better to go out with extra equipment and not need it than to go out there and get stuck into a firefight and you've got no BBs, you didn't bring all your mags with you or spare batteries and that sort of thing. It's so easy to carry this stuff, it's not massively heavy, just take a day sack out with you, and that's basically it. You know, if you are going out onto the ground, if you're leaving that fob, just prepare in the back of your mind a few extras. Even if you throw a battery in your pocket and an extra 500 BBs in a little pot in one of your pockets in your trousers, if you never use them over the weekend, it's no problem, but if you need to kneel and bomb up and you're getting into a deep firefight and you know that you've got a spare battery and you've got some spare BBs on you, then it doesn't hurt anyone. So yeah, that's going to be my common kind of issues that I see with people out on the ground, common mistakes that people make. Hopefully that's given you some insight as to just preparing yourself to be out on the ground for longer periods of time. Again, any questions, any feedback, anything you want to know, make sure you put it in the comments box below. There's going to be a ton of these videos coming out over the next couple of weeks. I've got a ton of questions to ask. A lot of them really good like today, really informative, and are going to help a lot of people. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all soon.